Well, once again, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this evening's webinar. Tonight, it's our pleasure to welcome Helen and Christopher Neave, who will share with us their story and some of the lessons they've learned over the last 10 years of managing their land entirely for the benefit of nature. But as usual, before I hand over to them, I just want to introduce a couple of us from the Yorkshire Rewilding Network Committee who are on the call tonight, and particularly for those who've joined us this evening for the first time. So I'm John Hartshorn. I tend to introduce the presentations, and we also have our network's chairperson, Jeff Davitt, facilitating questions and answers at the end. Now, as you can see, we're using Zoom, and I just want to reassure everyone on the call that you are all muted and your cameras are off. But if you would like to put questions forward to Helen and Christopher so they can tackle them at the end of their presentation, please use the Q&A button, which you should see in the Zoom window, usually at the bottom of the window. Jeff's going to monitor these questions. He'll grab them and he'll put them to Helen and Christopher at the end of their talk. But just before I hand over to Helen and Christopher, I just want to briefly remind you about the website and the Twitter feed from the Yorkshire Rewilding Network. And for those of you, again, who are here for the first time tonight, just a reminder that the network is a registered charity. We launched back on August the 1st last year, launched by a small group of volunteer committee members with the aim of bringing together anyone across Yorkshire who has an interest in rewilding at all scales and from right across the rewilding spectrum. And the purpose is for us all to inspire one another, share knowledge and experience, connect people with each other, and generally help Yorkshire develop into a more nature-rich and more sustainable region. There's a growing amount of content on the website. We have Rewilder stories, copies of the newsletters to date. There's recordings and materials from previous presentations, and a host of resources that we think people might find useful, such as book reviews, web links, etc. And hopefully, as the easing of the pandemic restrictions continues, we should hopefully get to plan a number of in-person events later in the year. Now, whatever the events, we will publicize them via the website and through the Twitter feed and in the newsletters. So do keep your eye out for these, and do remember to go to the Join Us page on the website and register to receive the newsletters if you don't already do so. And there's also a contact page on the website if you have any suggestions for us. And of course, if you're a Twitter user, follow the network on Twitter. We are growing quite quickly. We are approaching 700 followers. And we're really keen to provide the network with presentations and stories and information on interesting rewilding related topics. So if any of you out there has a topic that you'd like to potentially present to the network as a future webinar, either on its own or as part of another webinar, do let us know. And that also goes for your rewilding stories and technical topics, and preferably where there's a relevance to Yorkshire, or at least it adds something new to the overall discussion about rewilding in Yorkshire. And we'd love to hear your rewilding experiences. So that could include any project work you might be involved with or have undertaken, topics on rewilding related ecology, and involvement in ideas connected to the green economy as well. And it doesn't matter whether you're a rewilding landowner, a farmer who's putting some measures in place to improve ecology on the farm, or perhaps you're from another conservation organization or charity, a community group, or you might be a student or an academic researcher. We're interested in anything that's of relevance to rewilding in Yorkshire, whether it be hill, dale, river, coast, town, farm, bog or marsh. And you can email us with your idea and we can pick it up and discuss it further from there. But we've also got a new space on the website, particularly connected to that, where we share short pieces about aspects of rewilding, featuring different voices. And by that, I kind of mean your voices. And it's really a place for guest blogs, which could be anything from a story or an experience written in your own words, or some great photographs, or maybe a few minutes of video shot on your phone. We've just put one story live a couple of days ago from someone who's captured some back garden trail camera footage. And one of our trustees kicked the whole blog off by recording some bird song from a garden on World Rewilding Day, which was a couple of Saturdays ago. Now, as we are a volunteer-run charity, if you do enjoy this evening's presentation, which I'm absolutely certain you will, we'd be extremely appreciative of any donations you might be able to make to us to help with our running costs. And you can do this through the donate page on the website. Okay, let's crack on with the headline act. At this point, I would normally introduce our guests with a brief biography and a bit about their background, but I think given that this is a personal story anyway, I think I should just really hand over to Helen and Christopher. So if you are ready to go, Helen and Christopher, your time has come, and I'm just going to turn my screen off now and hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, John. So we will share our screen. Okay, right, hopefully you can all see that then. So I'm Helen and this is Christopher, and we're going to basically give our personal story of Make It Wild, our business Make It Wild, and the story of what we've done over the last 10 years of giving land back to nature. I do want to say that we are not ecologists, so you're not going to get theory and very much science, but it's a personal story of what we've done, so it's going to be quite practical. So who are we? I'm Helen. I'm a former consultant surgeon, and Chris is from a business background, and we live here in North Yorkshire. What have we done? Well, we have over the past 10 years, we have managed our land entirely for nature in various ways, which we'll describe, which includes planting a lot of trees, I should say, and some more conventional rewilding. When this spans a 10-year story, where we have various sites in North Yorkshire, which we'll explain to you, and why. Well, the reason that we started doing all this is basically for this reason, that Earth has lost 60% of its wildlife since 1970, and that's a stark and terrible statistic, and that's in my lifetime. More than half of the wildlife on our planet has been lost, and that's also applies to the UK as well. And when you look a bit more closely at that, the causes of this loss of wildlife is really largely down to human activities, to exploitation of wildlife, to destruction of habitat, and so that's really why we do what we do. We want to do our bit to try to redress the balance and give land back to nature, and that's really why we started this whole 10-year adventure. So we're going to look at different themes as we talk to you tonight. So first of all, people, tree planting, discovering what you've got and looking after it. We're going to talk about large herbivores, a little bit about water in various guises, when to step in, and grants and support that may be available to you, and finally a little bit about results. So I'm going to kick off talking about the people, and really it's sort of, I suppose it's a bit of a paradox when we're talking about rewilding for nature, but actually we found the most valuable links in the people that have usually found us and come to us and been involved with our work and enthusiastically helped us to do what we do. So the very first people that kind of came and found us when we bought our site at Bank Woods near Summerbridge was a group of archaeologists. Here's one of them surveying our little historic stone field barn. This is Katie, who is our intern for 2 summers running from York University. Here she is pulling the Himalayan balsam, and we'll mention more about that later. And here we've had help from ornithologists. This is Tony and Roz. I don't know if you're watching, but we couldn't have really put up all our bird boxes and checked them and monitored them as we have without their help. So really, I would advise anyone setting out on this journey to make sure you have some, make friends with people. We have a very active band of volunteers, and here they are doing some management of some holly just before Christmas, which we'll mention why we need to do that a bit later as well. Here's everyone's favourite volunteer activity, which is tree planting. And this is one of our daughters and her friends planting trees just over a year ago. There's somebody you may recognise who's been a great help with our project. And here is our A team, which is Tim, Leslie and Mike, without whom we couldn't have done all this really. And here they are smiling in the drizzle, fog and general rain at the top of a hill near Summerbridge. And I just wanted to mention one very special lady who's also helped us a huge amount in her own way. So this is Janet Williner. I don't know if you're watching, Janet, but thanks so much if you are. And on the left, she came to one of our volunteer events, and this is sort of looking after the saplings, which is what we do through this, well, it looks like the winter actually, but she was, maybe it was a very wet summer's day, but yeah, it was. So we have to look after our saplings in their tree tubes. So we lift them and take out the weeds, and Janet was helping us with that. And she said that she had 400 tree seedlings growing at home, and could we find a home for them? So of course we said, well, we'd be delighted. And this story actually made it into our local press. So there's Janet in the papers. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to talk a bit about trees and tree planting.
Well, yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you. Well, trees, yeah, I mean, we've possibly become most well known for that. I mean, in fact, this is even today's York Press, believe it or not. And an important milestone for us is that this week we will have achieved 50,000 tree planting over the last 10 years. I might say that that's not all personally, but we've had, as Helen was said, huge support from volunteers and also from contractors as well. The adventure started in 2011, 10 years ago. We were fortunate enough to acquire a piece of land right on the River Nid in a village called Kirkhamerton near York. And as Helen was saying, we'd become extremely concerned about the way things were going with nature, the loss of habitat and wildlife decline and so on. And we thought, well, can we do something about it, albeit a small contribution, but can we create a nature reserve and give some space back to it? But we were green in every sense of the word here, and we sought advice, a lot of advice from the Environment Agency, from ecologists, and I should like to say at this point from the Woodland Trust, because they gave us a huge amount of help. And in fact, if one gentleman, Pete Leeson, I want to name check him if he's watching. Thank you, Pete, for all the advice you gave us in those early days. This is actually an aerial shot of that first piece of land. This is before we owned it, but actually the condition when we started was unchanged. It was like this. It was a piece of rough grazing land with the river meandering around the edge. And to be honest, from an ecological point of view, it was a biodiversity desert. There was nothing really going on there. And actually, we decided that to begin with, we would just actually leave it alone for a couple of years. And I suppose, not unsurprisingly, it became an impenetrable sort of mass of thistles and docks and nettles. But we weren't perturbed. We knew that we were going to create a nature reserve. So, and we called it ultimately the Sylvan Nature Reserve. And it began with tree planting. And we actually, initially, we probably put something like 16,000 trees in, and then it's been added to, and there's 20,000 gone in now. And all of those species and others, and including ones for what they call riparian, because that's when trees that can cope with water, because unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, I don't really mean that, but the river floods now with increasing frequency. That's what I was really meaning. And the trees have to be able to cope with that. This image shows a couple of years after we began planting, and you can start to see the vegetation and the young trees starting to take shape. But yet, as 5 years after that, in 2018, you can really see the effect of that planting, and there's a tree canopy forming. Obviously, you can see areas that we've left clear. There's scrapes and there's ponds as well that we put in. But really, it was the trees that really changed this dramatically, and it became so rich in nature. There's bird song and invertebrates, and everything was happening. So we knew that trees were really the kickstart. And this next clip just explains, you know, what happens when you plant them.
We planted 20,000 trees here, and we were amazed by the explosion in biodiversity that happens when you plant trees on this sort of scale. Once the flowers arrive, you get insects and birds of prey and mammals, and nature just arrives.
So our next opportunity, we were so sort of inspired ourselves by what happened there that we wanted to do it again, and even bigger if we could. And an opportunity came up in 2016 with land in Nidderdale near Summerbridge. It's a larger piece of land, an altogether different prospect, really, with many existing habitats already there, including ancient woodland. And I mean, what we can say about that is that it is an absolutely beautiful. Every May we get this wonderful spectacle of bluebells across all 4 pieces of the ancient woodland, and it's absolutely to die for. We knew we had to look after that and conserve that. But we, you know, it wasn't just that. We took advice, and this time from a man called Phil Lythe from the Yorkshire Farming and Wildlife Partnership. And he helped us not just work out how we could look after it, but also how we could enhance it for nature, what we should do. And he did a thorough survey of what we had, and also gave us pointers on what we could do. And for example, we had to consider the physical relief that you can't tell on an aerial shot, but there's actually an awful lot of relief as you go up the valley, you go onto the higher ground. We thought, well, you can't plant trees right at the top and obscure these fantastic views of Nidderdale. So, you know, you have to take all that sort of thing into your plans. But also we knew that we wanted to reconnect some of that ancient woodland, because it will have been much bigger and a larger piece at one time. So where should the planting go? And we actually, as you can see on the next slide, we actually planted 12 acres of it. So, you know, not a huge fraction, but we did it so that if you look at the top left-hand corner, there's a field there which is adjacent to the woodland next to the road there. That added to the corridor, and then the piece really connecting those ancient woodlands. So we know that we've given wildlife an opportunity to really take home in that woodland. But we didn't plant, for example, in the upland grasses where we knew there were some red-listed birds living up there, and tree planting would have been the wrong thing to do. But really, not so sooner had we done this, but unexpectedly, the neighbouring land became available, and that was just too good to resist, being able to expand again. And here we are, we have a scheme on about 1/3 of the neighbouring land, a large plantation, with another, there's 2 things here. There's about 9,000 trees went there, but then we did what might be described as something a little bit unconventional. Well, it is. It's an experiment, really, of a large thicket dedicated purely for wildlife. So this is an area of nearly 2,000 square meters, which is, we've packed in the trees. 6,000 have gone in. Again, volunteers helped us hugely here. Mixture of trees and shrubs, I should say, and they're like hedges, double row hedges, 1.5 meters apart. And the idea being that the whole thing will become a really dense thicket. And I want to say at this point, to give thanks to an organisation called Ground Control, who very generously helped us and sponsored this project. Unlike hedging that you might see at the roadside, you often see young hedges where each tree is in its own little plastic spiral tube and a cane to hold it firm. But we didn't want to do that here because this will become impenetrable, and we didn't want to put 6,000 pieces of plastic into the environment that we'd never be able to recover. So in fact, we did this. We enclosed the entire thing in a deer and rabbit fence, and we don't have the trees don't have any shelters at all other than the external parameters. And you can sort of see what this is, a little film of the. I mean, this is literally only a couple of weeks ago that we finished this project. So you. And from this distance, you can't see the young trees, but take it from me, they're in there, and it, you know, we really will see how that develops over the years to come. We more recently we've been creating woodland across the River Nid Valley on the other side in a village called Dacre. It's if you show the film here. Shows a drone flying over, and we can see that there's 2 fields. We've got schemes going on in both, and I'd like to say again, generous sponsorship. There's an organization called the Everyone Club, so if you're listening tonight, thank you very much. There's a small copse dedicated in the memory of a man who sadly died leaving a young family, and they've got that woodland to remember him. And then there's also one for the Leeds Buddhist community in that field. So we have these partnerships that help us with all these projects. And finally, on trees, really, we're in the Northern Forest, and we wanted to contribute to this. It's an ambitious project to plant 50 million trees over 25 years in a huge swathe of land stretching from Liverpool to Hull. And we made a pledge at its launch in 2018 to plant 100,000 trees for the Northern Forest. And since then, there's been 3 planting seasons. And actually, at the end of this week, with the help of our volunteers again, we will actually get over the 30,000. So in other words, we're on track to achieve that 100,000 in a decade. The thing is about trees is that yes, as Helen was saying, it's a very popular pursuit to get them in the ground, but actually that's just the beginning, because well, for example, where we plant, there's a lot of strong wind. We're in exposed places. Will they actually stay upright? Can you stop them being browsed by deer, by rabbits, by even small mammals, believe it or not? Will the vegetation actually outcompete them and prevent them from thriving? Well, okay, we're going to get some losses. How many? How should you restock? If so, how much? And when do you take those shelters, those guards out? And I mean, the answer to all these questions is that there's an awful lot of hard work in tree planting, and it comes in the days, the weeks, the years afterwards. And this is the point. You put 20,000 trees in, wait 8 years, you've got to take them out again. And that's what we, again, with volunteers, I might add, we are still doing, and we will be still doing for years to come. Anyway, back to Helen.
Okay, so just a little bit more now about concerning what we have. And Chris has mentioned some of this with reference to bank woods, but again, we have done this for all of our sites, and I would really recommend it for any sizable piece of land that you are looking to rewild. You will probably need expert help, unless, unlike us, you are an expert, but you probably will want species surveys and habitat surveys. And we have had those done on our before our larger tree planting projects. You might want to look at the botany, the ornithology, archaeology. To do any sort of large-scale tree planting, you must get an environmental impact survey, because you might have some rare orchid and you don't want to plant trees which would kill off something that's even more valuable. And the other thing that we have found really useful is to survey our ancient trees, to go on the ancient tree inventory. And we're lucky enough to have nearly 40 official veteran trees between Bankwoods and Dowgill Grange. That's the land next door that Chris mentioned. So that's a really important thing to not, if you're into tree planting, don't just plant thousands of trees, but really think about what you've got and what you'd like to look after and enhance in the future. So I'll just whiz through a couple of these. So we've mentioned the ancient woodland, which is really precious. It's, you know, the rainforest of England really, and the biodiversity is astonishing. But we have deer, lots of deer, and they, as you may be aware, they'll just eat anything that grows. So they live in the woodland, and we had a problem where, or as you can see really, we've got trees from sort of 100 years and older, but we haven't got anything younger than that apart from holly, because the deer come along and eat it all. So we have invested in almost 2 kilometres of deer fence, which surrounds, if you can remember the map, there's 4 blocks of ancient woodland. It surrounds 3 of them, plus that planting in the middle. So there's about, is it about 15 acres or something, 16 or something like that, enclosed in deer fence. And the deer are excluded from this, and it also goes sort of up the hill and around 3 of these woodlands and the area in the middle, and that's part of our strategy to preserve what we've got. So that's to look after the ancient woodland. Yes, we've got one bit of hedge, and this was a new skill which I was taught by Mike. If you're watching, thank you very much. And I probably should have done a section on learning new skills, because this was an absolutely amazing thing. I got quite hooked on it really. So you do something terrifying to a tree on the left, then you do something even more terrifying and you lie it down as on the right. But actually this morning, all those trees that I thought I might have killed are sprouting into leaf, and it's going to be an amazing habitat. So just another aspect of looking after something that we already had. And we've supplemented, it was very gappy, very old, and we've supplemented it with some new plants as well. Here's another new skill, which is dry stone walling. We've got miles and miles and miles and miles of dry stone walls at Bankwoods and Dowgill Grange, and if it's a very, very technical bit, we'll get you know, an actual dry stone waller, but we've learnt from a young lady who'd been on a course, and she passed on her expertise, and we can have a reasonable stab at dry stone walling, and it's very valuable for creatures to, you know, spend the winter in and whatever. So that was 2 different occasions of dry stone walling. Oh, and this is something else that we discovered we had. Not the best film link, and you've missed it, but here was someone who already lived at Bankwoods. So that made us decide, that this little historic field shelter, we wouldn't do anything to it because we've got a barn owl living there. We've actually possibly got 3 barn owls now. We're hoping we'll have more later in the year. So I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk about herbivores, large ones.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as part of our rewilding strategy, we wanted to reduce the intensity of sheep grazing on the upland part of Bankwoods and replace them with a small herd of larger herbivores, which are known to assist with our conservation objectives. And they don't graze down to the roots. The pressure from their hooves disrupts the soil and reveals the dormant seed, and their cowpats spread the seed. So, and we chose, as you can see, belted Galloways, or Belties as they're affectionately known, because they're a hardy native breed that can thrive outside all year round. And so with help of local farmers, Jonathan Gratian and family, if any of them are listening, thank you, Jonathan and Ian and Chris, we introduced them to Bankwoods. So in one fell swoop, we became real livestock farmers ourselves, which we weren't before. And apart from the obvious husbandry that you need to look after them, and things like lots of stock-proof fencing everywhere and so on, comes a fair amount of new responsibilities, regulation and paperwork, and the sorts of things like animal passports and movement registers and speed testing and all sorts of things like that. But anyway, they're gorgeous to have around. Belties have a lovely temperament. I might say most of the time. If they're calving, you have to definitely watch yourself. But we also have a visiting bull, again, courtesy of Jonathan. So of course, we always have to think about safety when we have our volunteers. But this clip, of course, it's got the Belties in them, but it actually shows real rewilding in action that we have at Bankwoods. There's gorse, a lot of gorse, and it's great. It acts as a nursery for regenerating young trees, because of course, you know, things like deer and stuff don't go in and stop them. And we've got birch here, but there's actually elder and hawthorn, and there's even alder in the wetter patches behind that's coming through. And that's all because actually the sheep are not in this part, and these young trees have been able to get started. I mean, having said that, you know, gorse is fantastic, but we don't want it to completely take over, because then that we'll lose the abundant wild flowers that we've also got there. So, but we had an answer. And so we added to our conservation grazing team with, as you can see, some beautiful retired Exmoor ponies. And we went to the Yorkshire Exmoor Ponies Trust. Thank you to Susanna and the team there. We provided a home for 6 of their beauties, and those horses in return help us with rewilding, and we have seen them eating gorse, so they are doing their job there. Back to Helen.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about a few aspects of water, which is a feature of nature not to be overlooked. And we mentioned about the floods, and our Sylvan Nature Reserve at Kirkhamerton, again, both of our main pieces of land are very close to the River Nid, just by chance really, but at Sylvan the land does get flooded, as Chris said, with increasing frequency, but at least annually at the moment. And the power of the flood is quite something. It brings up huge great tree chunks, which then knock down our young trees, and we had about 10% loss at the beginning, and actually that was largely from flood related things. Firstly, a huge tree trunk came through and knocked down a load, but also it brings Himalayan balsam seed, and we've got a massive problem with there, which is another task that our volunteers help us with. And this picture shows two of our problems. That's at Sylvan, so an absolute wall of Himalayan balsam and rather cute but naughty deer as well there. Leaky dams is another thing that in my little collection of watery subjects. So a leaky dam is we have put in leaky dams in some of our woodland streams at Bankwoods, and they dam the stream when it's at its fastest flowing and create wetland with new habitat and encourage biodiversity behind the dam. And they also slow the flow down into the river. So by putting leaky dams at Bankwoods, we're helping with our flooding at Sylvan. I think it's quite that simple. Obviously the alternative would be beavers, but maybe that's for in another few years. So there's just a tiny little clip just to show. There's a couple of leaky dams here, and you can see that one's overspilling, so we might extend that one a bit. And there's another one that's overspilling on the other side. But from being a tiny little stream in the summer, we get these big pools, which will encourage different types of creatures to live there, hopefully. And then ponds, yes. Well, we have a bit of a love-hate relationship with ponds. We know that ponds are great for water, and you know, everyone will tell you if you want wildlife in your garden, you need a pond, and they're great for biodiversity, which is all very fine. So we set about digging 10 ponds at Sylvan, which require planning permission. So that was a challenge because all the forms require you to do a section and an elevation. That's the word I'm looking for. An elevation. Well, of course, ponds don't have any elevation really. So I did this project, so I had to sort of go back to my O-level geography and do some kind of little on graph paper the depth of the pond, etc. So we did that. We got over that hurdle. Digging them is the easy bit. Getting them to hold water is more of a challenge. So we went through, oh, it's clay, it might hold water. Oh no, it doesn't. Puddling clay, let's put puddling clay in it. No, that doesn't work. Oh, what about bentonite? That'll definitely fix it. And I'm afraid it didn't. So we have some rather dismally empty ponds at Sylvan, but sometimes, sometimes they're full, and you know, they can vary because actually they'll get flooded and then they'll fill up and then they'll empty. We did a scrape as well, which actually works exactly as we hoped. So it's seasonally wet, and then in the summer it might be dry, but that's fine for amphibians, and we do have frog spawn there. So that's all great. So when we came to dig a pond at Bankwoods, we decided to just go straight for a pond liner because we'd had enough of watching these empty and fill. So again, with the help of our fantastic volunteers putting the finishing touches to the pond, then the enormous liner, and here's the pond. So it's a bit ugly. It actually takes the water from a new barn that we've had built quite a way. Is it about half a kilometre or something up the hill? There's a pipe underground and it brings the water, so it's going to stay full, but not very pretty. And we've got plans to put some, you know, native plants around it. But even though it's not very pretty, 2 pairs of mandarin ducks have arrived, so they don't mind it being ugly. So the water's done its thing, and we've got biodiversity there. And I do know that they're not native, but we don't think they're going to expel any of the species. So and they're pretty, so we've left them there. So yes, when to step in, I'm doing this, aren't I? Yeah. So it's in the sort of purest of large scale rewilding, of course, you wouldn't step in, you'd shut the gate on it and you'd leave it, you'd turn your herbivores loose, and you know, you'd let it go back to nature. But as we've described, there are some times when we do step in, and that's, you know, we've got about 50 or 60 acres under rewilding, and all the other bits we've told you about with the tree planting and so on. So we have done tree planting as described. We've done wildflower enhancement of 2 different kinds. One is a forest of flowers, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. And we've also done some restoration of a wildflower hay meadow. So we've got experience of 2 ways of bringing back wildflowers. We do manage invasive plant species mostly. So the holly that you saw volunteers burning, it's the only thing on the understory of the ancient woodland, because the deer have eaten everything else. So we are sort of gradually removing that to let light through, and hopefully now the deer have gone, we'll get some other species. We manage the gorse as mentioned, and I'll show you a picture of how we do that in a moment. And of course the Himalayan balsam, we hand pull that or scythe it, but there's absolutely loads. That this summer was terrible. The deer we've mentioned, we step in with those, and we've put in a lot of bird nest boxes and bat boxes as well, and of course the ponds and the leaky dams. So here we are with creating the forest of flowers. So we did this at Sylvan, and this is a very, very deep plough, which is about 1 metre deep. It brings the subsoil to the surface, and it buries any weeds or grass. I shouldn't really say weeds because they're all wildflowers, aren't they? But the less desirable flora, and it buries the grass, and you then have this poor subsoil at the top. And we planted, I don't know how many kilograms of wildflower seed along with our young trees, and you get something that looks like that. So we have had waves of different wildflowers successionally year on year. That was obviously the year that the red campion was doing well, but you know, we've had a good year for the daisies, a good year for knapweed and something else there, and yeah, so that's just a bit more of an arty one, but that's a absolutely fantastic way, and the seed bank is still there, and we still get these waves of different wildflowers. Oh, and that was the knapweed, yeah. Oh, so this is managing the gorse, and we manage it by hand. We don't go in with tractors or diggers or anything. And here's sort of two ways we do it. We plant trees in cages, which will become big and will grow and will shade out the gorse. And we also manage it with loppers, and then we have a bonfire away from the gorse. So we do. When the trees grow, we'll have to do less of this sort of hands-on management, but it's fantastic for regeneration, but we don't want it to cover the entire thing because we've got a lot of wildflowers, many of which are quite rare. So Chris is going to talk about grants.
Yeah, well, all this stuff costs money. The trees, the accessories, all the fencing and so on. Creating that infrastructure for nature, and we talked about animal husbandry as well. So yeah, that's what we spent money on. But thankfully, there's some financial assistance available. All farmers are familiar with the basic payment scheme. It's a direct land subsidy. But interestingly, that's going to be phased out slowly over the next about 6 or 7 years, I believe, and replaced with incentives to deliver public good that will improve the environment, which of course we're very much in favour of that approach. We also got support through countryside stewardship schemes. I mean, even down to creating your plan. They will help you come up with a plan, and they'll help you, if you have a consultant to help you with that, creating the woodland. And then the mid-tier and higher tier schemes are for managing grasslands is the mid-tier for environmental benefit, and then a similar one for woodland is the higher tier. But I really want to mention the Woodland Trust again here, because they have helped us hugely with woodland creation, particularly with their so-called More Woods program. So, thank you, and I'm sure we'll be working with them again in the future. Now we're into what we call the results, and these are what we're showing you now. They're anecdotal. This is not a scientific study that we've performed, but we've been delighted to see nature moving in, although not always in the places you'd expect. We're having a barn built. The builders came in one morning and found a young tawny owl had flown in through a little hole in the heating system, and there it was. And then we even have a bat in a bird box, so they don't do what you always expect, but they're lovely wherever they are, really.
Oh yes, so I was just going to mention that we were very fortunate and delighted that Bankwoods has been designated as a site of importance for nature conservation, and this is we feel largely through reducing the grazing pressure from removing sheep. Largely, we have a light density of sheep on some small number of fields, but we basically removed sheep from this section. So this was an example of really a very, very detailed survey. 14 botanists arrived and did kind of a fingertip search of the ancient woodland and the glade in between them, the bit that we haven't planted with trees, I should say. And we've got many ancient woodland indicator species, some of which are really quite rare. So we are now a sink site, which is lovely.
Yeah, and into the bird boxes each year we of course see how they do, and you can see that there's 27, and in 2020 17 of them were occupied, so that's 63%. But actually, it could be in fact higher than that, and because there was evidence of others that were occupied, so it could have been as high as three quarters of them. And there was great tits and blue tits and pied flycatcher and nuthatch. But and last year we even had the summer visitor redstart, which was very encouraging. But we of course count the number of chicks in each nest, and we calculate that we pledged at least 136 new birds as a result of those boxes last year. And here's some pictures of those young chicks and parent birds and so on. Sometimes the parent birds weren't really very happy with us peering inside, but And then no, that wasn't a bird box. That would have been a very big box actually. But you know, we get these visitors, the red kite, and that's obviously it's called a band de demoiselle, a beautiful riverside invertebrate. Then we've got things like meadow brown butterflies on thistles we've left, and of course we've got lovely brown hares running around as well. So lots of wildlife, and then just having literally a short walk back in Sylvan. I mean, this could have only been, I don't know, 50 meters. And we just started to look all the birds' nests in that we could see. And so actually, we don't even know how many birds' nests there are in that woodland. There could be thousands. So that's very, very encouraging. Yeah. And then lastly, we have a short clip, which, yeah.
We just want to leave you with our sort of final thoughts.
Our strategy is to do more of the same, because the more trees we plant, the more rewilding of space that we have, then the more that nature will benefit. But the other thing we want to do actually is not try and do everything ourselves. We would like to actually help others and inspire others to do some of the things that we're doing now, even if it's just an individual putting a few trees in their garden, or it's a bigger enterprise planting 10,000 trees. Because actually the change that we've got to make is massive, and we all need to do it together.
Okay, so we're very happy to take any questions if anybody would like to ask us anything. I'll just stop.
Can I just say one thing there? Andrew Gray was in that shot, and if he's listening, Andrew, good evening. That Andrew has organisations called Truth Legal, and they also sponsored a woodland at Bank Woods, which I hadn't said earlier, and I wanted to say now. So thank you, Andrew.
Well, thanks to you both. We do indeed have some questions, which I think are framed by that great gallop through the practicalities of doing projects like this, and clearly evident a lot of hard work and the range of help that you've had. But I think I was most tickled by a former consultant surgeon being worried whether she'd be able to put a hedge to lay it properly. So anyway.
Weirdly similar.
Now I'm even more worried.
Yeah.
So the various questions then, tree tubes. Have you tried or experienced with alternatives to plastic? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, we've tried some cardboard ones, which we trialed 15 last planting season, and I'm afraid they failed dismally. They've all squashed, folded over, sealed the tree in so it didn't get any light, then dissolved in the rain and the wind, and I'm afraid they've been useless. Then we've had a different kind of cardboard ones to trial this year, with some replacement planting at Sylvan, and they look a bit more hopeful. They seem a bit sort of sturdier. They seem to be going to stay square, and they've got more holes in to let the light through, so we're hopeful for those. But are we allowed to mention this special?
Well, we've been given a sample. It's only a sample at the moment, but it's really it's really impressive. It's made from sheep's wool and cashew nut shell oil, and it feels and looks a bit like a plastic, but it's purely natural, and it will biodegrade really, you know, and I don't know. We can't wait to get our hands on a decent number of those and give it a good try.
We've only got one at the moment,
yeah.
And we've been promised some more, so they'll have to be used next season now because the planting season's over. But yeah, it's really exciting, and I think that could be, you know, the way forward. But as you saw, we diligently collect them all. We don't leave any around. So yeah, but it is a shame about plastic. No one's invented anything better. Well, unless they have, and it's cashew nuts. But there you go.
That's great, thank you. You seem to be using the rewilding word a bit more liberally these days. Is that something you've always done, or something that you've come to more recently?
Well, when we started, so it was literally a family project at the land by the River Nid at Kirkhamerton, and we hadn't even heard of rewilding then. It was literally giving it back to nature was the way we talked about it. But I suppose in the last sort of 5 years, probably, we've heard about it more, and obviously NEP and other you know, early adopters of such things. So we've read about those, and I think when we bought Bank Woods, we did have a sense that the upland bit would be much better left to nature, and you know, it was actually Woodland Trust guy who said, well, you really want to get rid of these sheep. So we sort of tumbled into rewilding. But interesting, we had called our business Make It Wild. So it all sort of lined up quite nicely, really.
I would say that we're still managed rewilders.
Yeah.
And I think and it's partly scale.
It's to do with scale.
Yeah, I mean, you know, NEP is absolutely, you know, the iconic example, but theirs is an order of magnitude bigger, and I just don't think we could quite take the same approach, to be honest.
No, I think that's probably true, and they would say they still do a lot of management as well. So that's a reality. Kind of related to that, then, what's been the reaction of neighbours and local farmers to what you're doing?
Generally positive, and they might be a bit puzzled, but when we explain, you know, what it's all about and why we're doing it, and about biodiversity loss, and that, you know, that we're losing species and that we're trying to support biodiversity and give bigger spaces for foxes and hare and things, I think people get it, really. And there's a bit of a thing of, well, it's your land, you can do what you like with it type of a thing, really. But I mean, I think and I mean, in the village, in Summerbridge, well, and in Kirkhamerton, we're quite well known, and people know what we're doing, and they love to see what we're doing. There's a public footpath around Sylvan at Kirkhamerton, so anytime we're there, we see lots and lots of walkers, and you know, they ask us what we're doing, and you know, how many trees we planted and all that kind of thing. So I think it's largely positive, but we haven't tried to introduce wolves or anything yet. So, you know, there's time.
Okay, thank you. And sort of things on the ongoing maintenance. Did you, or do you often find you need to water the saplings in the first few years? And do you manage the meadow? Do you do any cutting or just leave it? How does that go?
I mean, there's certainly the drought that occurred in, what would that be, 2019, was it? No, actually.
Anyway, a few years.
Yeah. We did actually find ourselves actually watering the young trees, which was a bit of an impossible task, actually, because how do you do that? I mean, it's not irrigated in any way, but we were so worried we would lose them before they had a chance to establish themselves. But the thing is, I suppose the truth is that if, you know, climate change, we are going to have to accept that species that can cope are the ones that will survive, and we can't artificially prop up things indefinitely just because the climate, you know, has changed. I mean, that's not practical or feasible in any way. So reluctantly, you might even have to accept that something's gone. But then if something goes, something else will come in. I mean, that's what nature is, really. It's nothing does it quite like nature for that.
The mowing of the wildflower meadows, yes, it's going to come to its second summer since sowing, actually, the one that we sowed with the green hay, and there is a sort of bit of a recipe, really, of when you're meant to mow or let your animals in, and when you don't. So we'll be following that, but the idea is to weaken the soil, mow and take it away as much as you can before you start. And at Sylvan, where we have got a big sort of circular clearing which is in the wildflower planted areas, and again we mow and take it away in the very late summer after the seed is set. So yeah, I mean, all of these things, there's a lot of maintenance.
You could certainly see that from the talk, thank you. There's a question about public access, in particular kind of bridleways, people saying they find it difficult to find places where it's safe to ride. Is there permissive paths, or would there be any scope for any bridleway around the edge of any of your sites? Or?
Well, there is one at Sylvan, and it is a bridleway, isn't it?
It's a bridleway,
yeah. And there was a whole controversy about a bridge that would have extended it into a much bigger bridleway that would have made a sensible route, but that's got rejected, didn't it? Apparently, or something. It was before we bought it. So, but we do. I mean, because we've made what look like, well, they are paths through the woodland at Sylvan, through the new woodland. When in the first lockdown, we had a kind of bordering on a bit of a problem of it being so busy all the time, because we were all encouraged to take our hour of exercise, and lots of people would come, and I mean, it's fine, and part of what we want to do is to share what we're doing, share our passion, get other people to love nature too, but it just got a bit much when you'd have sort of families on bikes and crowds of people, and so we are marking the footpath a bit better and putting some little fences and indicating some private bits,
some conservation areas.
So we've got a sign which says private conservation area,
so people can then know where to keep to the paths.
So we're trying to encourage people to keep to what is the public footpath and not stray everywhere else all over it. At Bankwoods, there's a tiny little bit of footpath, but it's so much larger there. 150 acres with both bits together, and we don't have too much of a problem there, do we? But I mean, as we start using it more, and we've got the barn there just about to be finished, and we'll have events and open days and things like that. So we will then have footpaths, through the woods and things, which are the advisable routes. But we're really doing it for nature, so we don't particularly want crowds of people walking through it. And it is very much our intention that even when we start doing things there, we would only do it on sort of 3 days a week and leave the rest of the week for nature. That's what we're doing it for, really. So yeah,
that's good. It's always a tricky balance of that interaction between people and numbers, and just how it fluctuates and what the priorities are and so on. So I think, it sounds like you're taking a pragmatic approach to that balance. Mm-hmm. A couple more specifically about kind of the site and its development. To what extent is natural regeneration I think you mentioned it from the gorse to a degree. Is that happening more now that the deer are fenced out, or is it too early to see?
The deer fence was only completed the end of last year, wasn't it? So we haven't really had chance for any seedlings to reveal themselves, but in other areas where the belties are and the sheep have gone, I mean, there will still be deer there, but they're not kind of.
I mean, but there's in the wettest bits, then there's almost like a little forest of young alders coming up. So it's really encouraging that. So I think we have got a lot of natural regen of trees. And actually at Sylvan we are already getting it as well, seedling trees that we haven't planted. They're sort of younger than that, and the blackthorn is spreading.
So we are already seeing that. Yes.
And conversely, with the Himalayan balsam, is that sort of the same problem or a growing problem every year? Are you seeing any signs of getting ahead?
Himalayan, I mean, we can see it now. There's a mat of the tiny little cotyledons of the Himalayan, which is covering. I mean, I was what was I there? Only yesterday was it, and it's covering. So we know that it's going to. But the saving grace now is that the canopy is tall and it's established, and the Himalayan can't really reap the same sort of havoc. It'll be on the fringes, it'll be on the margins where the light is, and it'll be coming into the paths and things like that. But it won't really harm the trees anymore. And that's encouraged. So we'll get in there and we'll clear the paths, and we'll try and stop some of it. But we can't win that war. It's absolutely massive.
We worked, I mean, for the first few years when the trees were tiny, we worked really, really hard on it. And there weren't so many floods, I don't think. We actually, so 2 years ago, we actually practically got rid of it. And then we've had some massive floods last year and early this year, and it's just all come back, and it's horrendous. I mean, we even when we were, practically got rid of it, we would leave some because it's really good for bees, for sort of late pollen and nectar. But when the trees were tiny, it was a bit of a nightmare. I mean, it won't harm them, but it just is very, very dominant, and we won't, because of the frequent flooding, we won't really ever get an understory in the bit that floods, because everything gets washed away. On the slightly higher land where we did the forest of flowers, we are getting an understory, and that's where we're getting a bit of regeneration as well. But it's a complete pain. I mean, we learned to scythe. That was another of our new skills. It's bigger than a scalpel, but we scythe, and we hand pull it. So it's just a bit of an ongoing thing.
And then there are kind of a suite of questions relating to how you identified land that you might look to acquire, how that's funded, then the ongoing costs and potential revenues from the whole activity. How does that all work? I mean, it could be another whole evening, but maybe a brief comment.
I mean, we have established an enterprise, so Make It Wild is a business, and the idea is that we hope to be able to generate funds so that we can keep doing what we're doing, and in fact expanding what we're doing, because our mission really is to get as much nature reserve as possible. But the value, for example, in the trees, yes, people are funding it through dedications, through sponsorship, through carbon offsetting are the main feeds for us. And so yeah, and we look out for land that we can continue the work. I mean, the truth is land is expensive. I mean, let's not forget that. And the more usable it is for agriculture, the more expensive it is. So really, it would, if we're looking now, we're looking for quite poor quality land, if the truth be known, if it's out there and available on the market, so that the actual capital outlay is managed and controlled, because that's the only way we'll be able to take it forward.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of income streams, you have a holiday cottage as well, of which the guests have exclusive access, to the nature reserve. So that's another thing, and that was just a serendipitous thing. It came on the market, and it was adjoining. So it's kind of we've got diverse income streams, haven't we, really? Yeah. Excellent,
thank you. The other question is one I'll just make a comment on. Someone's asked about how can we maximise rewilding in our gardens. My suggestion for that is to look out for our newsletter coming out in the next day or two. The theme is going to be about rewilding gardens. So
very good. Yeah,
that's a very welcome question. And if you go on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter there if you haven't already done so. Otherwise, I think I've covered the bulk. There is also a question about grazers. We're hoping that one of our next 2 webinars will be about grazers. So we'll maybe cover that there. Time's pushing on now, so I think I need to wrap up. But all I would say is, if you have enjoyed this evening's webinar, please remember that we're, as the Yorkshire Rewilding Network, an entirely voluntary organisation, and do need a bit of funding to cover our running costs. So thanks to those who have already donated during the presentation. You can go to our website and donate there if you'd like to. And there is much more detail about what Helen and Christopher are doing on their website, makeitwild.co.uk. And if you've got any more specific queries that you'd like to follow up, there's a contact form on there. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. But thanks to John for setting this up and for the introduction. Thanks especially to Helen and Christopher, and to all those that have joined this evening. We do aim to put the recording on our website in the next few days. So if you've got friends who've missed it, point them there. And we'll be in touch soon with details, as I say, of our newsletter with a gardening focus and about our forthcoming webinars. But we'll leave it there for this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.